when I took a look at what's happening and why I think this dissection is able to occur now in 2010 between the Valley and other geographies was, when I started my career in the semiconductor business, there was maybe 100,000 people in the world who understood what to do, how to do it, the vast majority of which lived in Silicon Valley. What's happened is technology has advanced so far that the fine-tuning of manufacturing, the armies of PhDs you need to do some of the stuff that they're working on, isn't necessary in the software world. And that's enabling ecosystems around the globe to pop up that don't necessarily require local armies of teams that are highly specialized. So the manufacturing nature of what we're doing has been pulled out and extracted. And I think last night we were hearing words from the MRI minister just around percentage of people who go to work to manufacturing something and the percentage of people today who go to work to manufacturing something. And I think it's, vastly in the favor of people who don't manufacture products anymore. So I think that was a very interesting stat and combination of information that I think was important to understand. Our firm is very focused on early stage technology companies, probably ones you've never seen, never heard of, and hopefully one day become a household name for you. What's interesting around this concept is when we started is I met my partner Sandeep, who lives in Palo Alto when I lived in the Valley, and we started with this notion of, well, you need a bit of the fire that burns daily in the Valley, and you need to be able to carry that torch to new geography and understand how that works, why it works, with people who've lived it, and try and stoke that fire again in another geography. We will not replicate the Valley. We're not talking about copying things there. We're talking about creating an ecosystem. We very publicly will talk about this stat. In our first $1 million we invested, I think you can flip to the slide 3. Oh, I'll flip to that. In our first $1 million invested, we created 250 jobs. And the funny stat that I always talk about with jobs is if we needed jobs in this city, I'd tear up University Avenue, I'd tear up the 401, and I'd get lots of people employed doing construction. So we're not talking about construction here. We're talking about careers. People who have real careers that we're getting into jobs where they start in their 20s and will forever for their career be in this industry, innovating, working on these things. They start at a young age. They will always be in this industry, and that itself is creating a career for these people to build a livelihood on, which inherently as an innovation economy is what you need to bolster big successes. Now, I think one of the key elements that's happened is Toronto as an epicenter. We have 250 in our first million. I think we get to 2,500 in the next 2 years, and I think we get to 25,000 in the next 4 years. It is a very simple Moore's Law type problem that we can solve with people, because it takes people who are working at safe jobs that really have an itch and a knack to do something to go out there and do it. And I think that's the thing that this room is supporting. That's the thing that this room is spawning. And when you go talk to the people who are in their 20s working not only in our portfolio, but any other startup company around that's really working on innovation, or even in the big companies, it's the chance to change the world that the 20-year-olds have that they didn't have 10 years ago that's going to create all this innovation.
Yeah. In fact, if you reverse one slide, and take a quick look at your portfolio of companies in your current portfolio, we're seeing companies that I think some of us will recognize. One that I just met, a young gentleman who's in the room, Ripple, is a company that I think you've recently invested in, which is an interesting story, with 20 employees right here in Toronto and another 5 in the Valley, a social media company. And I think that applies to perhaps the full gamut of the companies that you have in the portfolio. And in venture, one other thing that you've done that I find quite remarkable is that there's an adage, a well-known adage, that venture capital is a local business, that generally venture deals are done within a 2 or 3 hour drive. You've taken that to a rather extreme level, pardon the pun, because all of your portfolio companies, with perhaps a few exceptions, are actually located right in your building.
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of background around that. So one of the things when people are working on change the world type ideas and concepts is these are isolating experiences. We have a handful of folks on that screen that are in our office, not to be close to myself or Sandeep, but to be close to each other so they don't feel like they're trying to climb the mountain by themselves. So that in itself has created a self-assembly amongst these populations of people that is allowing them to learn from each other, grow from each other, recruit, learn how to recruit people, learn how to solve problems, learn how to get funding to move these businesses forward. And I think that's very interesting. That's not to say the best companies are in our building. I'm just saying they migrate there on their own choice to be with like-minded folks. And as they grow and grow up, they move out and they get their own space. And it's been successful for us.
Thanks, Amar. Michael Kraft, maybe we could go to the next presentation, cue it up while I introduce Michael. Michael is the president, the CEO, and the founder of Lingo Media Corporation. Lingo Media is a diversified online and print-based education products and services company focused on English language learning in China. Since 2007, the company expanded its reach through a series of strategic acquisitions led by Mr. Kraft. And under his stewardship, the company has transformed and developed successful relationships with key government and industry associations, establishing a strong presence in China's education market, which is more than 300 million students, and is now extending its reach beyond China into other parts of the world. His own background includes over 15 years of experience in sales, marketing, corporate management roles with a record of success in both private and public companies. So, Mr. Kraft, one of the things about your business model, I'll ask you to go through a presentation. Sure. I think we have a short video also to show if you hand him the remote.
Great.
But one of the things that I'm most intrigued by is your use of virtually all the capital sources that we have available to grow a business. You've raised money by going public on the Toronto Stock Exchange using a capital pool corporation or CPC vehicle. You've raised money with strategic investors and very near and dear to my heart, international strategic investors, including Orascom from Egypt, the famous Egyptian investor in Global Live, which is, of course, the Wind mobile brand. And you've raised capital from non-dilutive government sources. So I know you'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll ask you to go through the company and sort of take us to where you are today.
In our business, I'm going to take you through a very, very quick synopsis as a startup, talk about innovation, talk about where we are and how we've transitioned. The market opportunity, as you can see from the video, is enormous and growing. So really, our story and our mission has been, we started off in the publishing business. This is a startup company. I had never published a textbook before in my life, had relationships that were established in China over a number of years, and won the adoption to publish the textbooks and teaching materials that were mandated, as you saw in the video, across China in 2001, beginning in grade 3. From there, the company grew, developed its products, has co-published 350 million textbooks, developed 348 titles of textbooks and learning materials, and the goal was then, that was a great contract, a great story, great market entry, how to get to the next level. The partner was the Chinese government. There was limitations. It was a royalty-based business model. So we said, look, it's got to be technology. The government in China was encouraging technology. They were opening up for private investment. And we saw the opportunity being speaking English. Students across the world can learn how to grammar, vocabulary acquisition. They can pass a TOEFL test. They can come here to study abroad, but they can't speak. Why? Because they have nobody to practice with. So our first acquisition was a company in Taiwan that was the world's first digital English language teacher. It was called Speak to Me. They were using speech recognition with avatars, and we acquired that company late in 2007. Today, that's speaktome.net, and it's the largest English language learning community online in China with over 1.5 million registered users. The company then did another acquisition of Parlo. Parlo was a leading e-learning company in America back in the .com sector, and it's Speak to Me using speech recognition and avatars with a learning management system that was built in India. And then most recently we acquired the Q Group. The Q Group is again a fee-based training company, and that particular company is a British company with operations in Israel. The financing, as you alluded to earlier, being a startup in Canada, moving forward, was not easy. The company was very innovative in its capital structure, raising both private rounds, public rounds of money. Government rounds were probably the best round because they were non-dilutive, and most recently, a strategic acquisition from Orascom, who saw the opportunity of what we were doing and were frankly interested in how can we take what we're doing to a mobile platform. The publishing I've talked about, it's been a great market entry, established a brand in Canada. You talked earlier about Canada needing to establish a brand. Well, we created Canadian English, which didn't really exist. It was always British or American English. Social learning, Speak to Me is something new. It's innovative. It's engaging, and we're using computer-based learning, which is really the only solution. and the only way to teach people how to speak, because there's not enough native or non-native English teachers in the world to meet that demand of the, in China, for instance, it's 300 million people speaking English. Why do some people speak with a British accent? They learned on a tape. But the reality is you move out of urban centers, whether it's Beijing, Shanghai, your hotel out of Mexico City, and nobody speaks English. So that's the opportunity, and that's what we're looking after. So as I alluded to earlier, Speak to Me is using a very different embedded advertising. That's the business model. SmartCar was the first launch advertiser. Parlo is Speak to Me on steroids with a learning management system. The first client was China Southern Airlines. We used China Southern Airlines to both validate the business model and the pricing model. And today they're using our platform to train 7,000 flight attendants. Another very interesting project, which is leading us into our sort of product development scope of creating an online English assessment product, is something that we did for the recent Shanghai Expo, where they had a problem. They had 1 million+ volunteers. And of those volunteers, they needed to select only 80,000. So we developed a system that could test online or assess online the spoken English capabilities of those applicants. And that worked quite successfully. This is the company that I mentioned. If I go back very quickly, that's a British company with operations in Israel. Israel, surprisingly enough, produces probably the leading online English training companies, Degum, and then Edusoft and Q Group. So this company was recently acquired by us. John Kushner, who was in the room and spoke earlier, was the advisor representing one of Israel's leading PE firms, SCP Partners, and was great in facilitating that transaction. So we're now integrating that asset. So our growth strategy has been basically to acquire undervalued assets and opportunities and other people's mistakes. And we're now really transitioning from an R&D company into a sales and marketing organization and looking to grow, as I said, in English online assessment and hopefully with Erascom and their relationships into some mobile applications. So that's the Lingo Media journey, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.